Prison life ain't easy, but many inmates have nothing but time to come up with tips and tricks to make their life more easy behind bars. There are many crafty life hacks that inmates in prison do use to make their life better and easier. From things you could actually use in your own home to things which are just weird and kinda gross. I'm Charlie, and today we're going to look at inmates reveal prison life hacks they use. But before we get put in solitary confinement, why not subscribe and press the notification bell too? Coming up first, we have bed bugs. There's one big issue in every prison that many people don't realize. But anyone who's been behind bars will know that bed bugs are a big deal. Bugs are a big problem in prisons, especially older ones. Prisons are not exactly the most clean places on earth. They don't have huge budgets, and there's not cleaning people coming around making sure everything's neat and tidy. So that's why inmates have come up with a way to make sure their beds are bug-free. What inmates do is take jar lids and put them under the legs of their bed. They then fill these lids with water. This will ensure that bugs cannot climb up their bedposts. That's because bugs, of course, cannot climb through water, so they'll simply get stuck in this trap. Of course, they will still climb on the walls and ceiling, but this life hack does prevent inmates sleeping with spiders in their beds at night. Next up is dental floss. One of the most valuable things to an inmate is some dental floss. But that's not because inmates really care about their dental hygiene. You see, dental floss is incredibly versatile and can be used for almost anything behind bars. Many inmates use dental floss to stitch up clothing, and sometimes they use it to create clotheslines for drying their clothing. Some inmates also use dental floss to cut soft foods like cheeses. But the main use for dental floss behind bars is a method of communication. Inmates will tie written notes to one end of dental floss and then throw them to other cells. If the note doesn't get to the right place, they simply reel it back in like a fishing line. It also ensures that if a note doesn't reach the intended cell, then a security officer won't see it. Otherwise, inmates could risk giving away key info to a prison officer. Also, if you gather up a lot of dental floss, you can bind it together and make a strong rope. Sometimes this is used to escape, or sometimes to harm others. Next up is hair dye. Just because you're locked up doesn't mean you don't want to look good, and that's especially the case for many female prisoners. Many men and women do like to dye their hair behind bars, but most prisoners won't have access to beauty items like hair dye, and chances are they're not going to let you out of your cell to go to the local salon. So that's why many inmates will make hair dye out of hot water and a powdered drink mix like Kool-Aid. A powdered drink like Kool-Aid has lots and lots of food dye inside it, so it can be used to dye hair. Sometimes inmates will also mix conditioner into this to make an easy-to-use paste. So Tekashi69 can keep his rainbow hair behind bars with this trick. Next up we have toothpaste. First dental floss and now toothpaste. You may think that inmates really care about their oral hygiene, but that's not why they're buying Colgate. Instead, toothpaste can be used for many things, including patching up walls. A lot of the time in prison, prisoners want to hide various things they're not allowed to have. They do this by making a small hole in the wall to hide their contraband. And then to fill in that hole, they use toothpaste. Sometimes they can even begin to make small escape tunnels and fill that in with toothpaste. Toothpaste is also used behind bars for getting stains out of clothing and shoes. In prison, laundry services are very limited. And finally, toothpaste is used for soothing bug bites. As I mentioned before, there's lots and lots of bugs in prison, and even if you do use the jar lid technique, you may still get a couple of bug bites. Next up is tattoos. One big part about prison culture is inmates giving each other tattoos. A lot of the time, this happens if a prisoner joins a prison gang, and in some prisons, this is mandatory. Of course, it's not enforced by the prison officers, but the inmates themselves. And sometimes, for fun, inmates do like to give each other tattoos. Now, tattoo shops need lots of licenses and have to have checks for sanitation, but behind bars, all of that goes out of the window. Instead, they make a tattoo machine using a motor from a CD or cassette player. They also use a battery pack and a pen. For the ink, they often mix shoe polish and water together. One very popular prison tattoo is to get a teardrop underneath your eye. You actually only get this if you've taken a man's life, so if you see someone with that tattoo, then run. However, because of how unclean this tattoo method is, many inmates sometimes get infections on their tattoos. Next up is prison wine. In most prisons, you're not allowed booze behind bars, and that especially goes for fine wines. But did you know that behind bars, inmates make a wine known as Pruno? Pruno is made from fermented fruit, and it's known as a prison wine which they make to pass the time. Some say the wine tastes a bit like the drink Four Loko, but basically what they're saying is it does not taste good. Inmates will sometimes mix this together in a toilet, but many inmates, if they have it, will use a container. The ingredients they usually use are peeled oranges, brown apples, sugar, yeast, warm water, a fruit cocktail, and some raisins. Sometimes it can be hard to find yeast, so instead they'll use breadcrumbs. They mash all of this up and then store it in a bag in a dark place for 7 to 8 days. Now, personally, if I was locked up, I would not be drinking this. But prison can get pretty mundane, so wine can spice things up every now and then. One inmate described the taste as a nasty sweet and sour margarita, but he said the plus is it does give you a buzz. And finally on the list, we have hair curling. This is another beauty tip many female inmates use behind bars. Many women in prison may want to have beautiful curly hair, but you will not be getting a hair curler behind bars. That's because it could be used to hurt other inmates. So instead, they'll use the roundness of an empty toilet paper roll to make a great hair curler. This DIY cheap hair curler does take a while to do, but over time you can build up enough of these rolls and have enough for your entire head of hair. Many women inmates do this behind bars and it allows them to have curly hair without a hair curler. So now you know some great tips to survive prison if you ever get locked up. But I would say my ultimate tip for you is to not commit crimes and go to prison. Even with all of these great hacks, it's not exactly an easy life to live. But now it's time to make your voice heard. Which prison life hack did you think was the best? If you want some more amazing videos, then check out my second channel. There'll be a link to that on screen in a moment. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.